Captain Zena Xylith stood in her office aboard the interstellar mining station Delta 9, her crystalline antennae twitching with confusion as she reviewed the latest incident report. The station's first human crew members had arrived 3 standard cycles ago, and already they were proving to be the most perplexing species she'd encountered in her 2 centuries of service. Lieutenant Quirks, she addressed her Volasian security chief, whose blue scales shimmered under the station's artificial lighting. Please explain to me again why Engineering Bay 4 was filled with what you describe as floating colorful gas-filled spheres during 3rd shift. Lieutenant Quirks's tail coiled nervously. Captain, Engineer Russell and his team insist it was a birthday celebration for Engineer Wong. They claim it's a mandatory human cultural observance that cannot be postponed or ignored. Zena's antennae crossed in puzzlement. A celebration of birth? But Engineer Wong was clearly not born yesterday. She's been alive for approximately 31 Earth years. They celebrate the anniversary of birth each Earth year, Captain, Quirks explained, looking equally bewildered. They gather, inflate these balloons, consume sweet nutritional substances they call cake, and sing a traditional chant about longevity. Zena pulled up the station's cultural sensitivity protocols on her holoscreen. After the great misunderstanding of 2184 between the Arcturians and the Centaurians over respiratory meditation practices, all station commanders were required to accommodate cultural observations within reasonable safety parameters. And the purpose of this ritual? She inquired. According to Chief Engineer Russell, it's to make people feel special and loved. They insist it boosts crew morale and strengthens social bonds. Quirks's scales shifted to a lighter shade of blue, indicating deep thought. Though I fail to see how acknowledging someone hasn't died yet accomplishes this. Zena was about to respond when her office door chimed. Enter, she called out, and Engineer Russell stepped in, his broad smile instantly filling the room with what humans called cheerfulness, another concept Zena was still trying to grasp. Captain. Just the person I wanted to see, Russell beamed, holding what appeared to be a data pad. We're planning a station-wide birthday calendar. It'll help us track everyone's special day, including our non-human crew members. Zena's antennae drooped slightly. Engineer Russell, my species doesn't have birthdays. We emerge from our crystalline matrices when we achieve consciousness. Perfect. Russell exclaimed, much to Zena's surprise. We'll celebrate your Matrix Emergence Day instead. When was that? Approximately 47,283 standard rotations ago, but that's next week in Earth calendar. Russell's excitement seemed to increase exponentially. Oh, this is going to be amazing. Your first birthday party ever. We can incorporate crystalline themes into the decorations, maybe some geometric patterns. Lieutenant Quirks's scales had shifted to a fascinating shade of purple Zena had never seen before. Captain, should I update our security protocols to accommodate this expansion of the celebration parameters? Before Zena could respond, Russell was already heading toward the door. Don't worry about a thing, Captain. We'll handle everything. Just remember to act surprised. He paused at the threshold. Oh, and maybe wear something festive? Do you own anything that isn't regulation uniform gray? After Russell's departure, Zena and Quirks stood in silence for several moments. Finally, Zena spoke, her voice carrying the weight of command decision. Lieutenant, please send a station-wide memo. All personnel are to submit their birth or equivalent emergence dates to Human Resources. Additionally, requisition additional fire suppression systems for our gathering spaces. She paused thoughtfully. And perhaps we should study more about this cake phenomenon. For cultural understanding purposes, of course. Of course, Captain, Quirks replied, his scales still that fascinating shade of purple. Should I also inquire about the traditional birthday chant? The humans seem quite insistent about its proper execution. Affirmative. We cannot risk a diplomatic incident over incorrect melodic patterns. Xena turned to her window, watching the stars beyond the station's protective shields. And quirks? Perhaps it's time we reviewed our cultural exchange programs. These humans might be onto something with their celebration of existence. As Quirks left to carry out his orders, Xena found herself wondering what a festive outfit might look like. Perhaps it was time to experiment with colors other than regulation gray. After all, if she was going to participate in this human cultural phenomenon, she might as well do it properly. In the following days, the station buzzed with unprecedented activity. Crew members from various species began sharing their own existence acknowledgement traditions. The Valaxians introduced their scale-shedding ceremony, the Arcturians shared their consciousness expansion rituals, and even the typically reserved quantum collective expressed interest in what they termed the periodic celebration of continued functionality. Perhaps, Xena reflected, these human cultural things weren't so puzzling after all. They were just another way of bringing the universe's diverse species a little closer together, one floating gas-filled sphere at a time. Captain Xena Xylitha's antennae vibrated in a way they hadn't since the infamous birthday party incident. The strange rhythmic pulsations emanating from Recreation Module 3 were setting off every sensitivity receptor in her crystalline structure. Following the sound, she found Lieutenant Quirks already at the scene, his scales cycling through various shades of confusion. "Report," she commanded, trying to ignore the way the vibrations made her crystalline form resonate uncomfortably. "It's the humans again, Captain," Quirks replied, his tail twitching in time with the beats. "They've installed what they call a sound system, and are engaging in synchronized physical movements they term dancing." Through the observation window, Xena watched as Engineer Russell, now sporting what he called a vintage leather jacket, demonstrated something called the moonwalk to an increasingly intrigued group of Arcturians. Their tentacles swayed in apparent attempt to mimic the smooth backward glide. "And this is another cultural requirement?" Xena asked, remembering how the birthday celebration had eventually led to improved crew morale, once they'd replaced the fire-damaged panels in Engineering Bay 4. "They claim it's Friday night," Quirks explained, consulting his data pad. "Apparently, this particular segment of their planetary rotation cycle demands what they call a dance party." Before Xena could respond, the door slid open and Technical Officer Pari Patel emerged, her face flushed with what humans called excitement. "Captain. Lieutenant. You have to join us. We're teaching everyone Earth dances, and the Quantum Collective is absolutely killing it at the robot." Through the window, Xena observed with mounting concern as several shimmering energy forms indeed appeared to be moving in rigid, mechanical patterns that seemed to delight the human crew members. "Officer Patel," Xena began carefully, "our environmental systems aren't designed for this level of activity." "Oh, don't worry. We've already recalibrated the gravity modulators for optimal dance conditions," Patel grinned. "Did you know the Valaxians can do amazing things with their tails when you play bass-heavy Earth music?" Several of Quirks's fellow Valaxians were indeed using their tails to perform impressive spiral movements in the reduced gravity field. Their scales had taken on a previously unknown iridescent pattern that seemed to pulse with the rhythm. "And what precisely is the purpose of this dancing?" Xena inquired, trying to understand the cultural significance. "It's about joy, Captain. Expression. Connection." Patel's enthusiasm was almost tangible. "Look at Engineer Wong teaching the Arcturians to salsa. Have you ever seen different species interact so naturally?" Xena had to admit she hadn't. The usual rigid protocols of interspecies interaction had somehow dissolved in the face of this rhythmic chaos. Even the Quantum Collective, typically so reserved in their energy manifestations, were actively engaging with physical beings. "Captain," Quirks interrupted her observations, his scales now glowing with an unexpected warmth, "I've been analyzing the patterns. There appears to be a mathematical consistency to these movements. Perhaps we should study this phenomenon more closely. For security purposes, of course." Before Xena could formulate a response, the music changed to something with a deeper, more resonant frequency. To her surprise, her crystalline structure began to harmonize with the vibrations, creating a pleasant sensation she'd never experienced before. "That's it, Captain!" Patel exclaimed. "You're naturally finding the beat. Your crystal structure is actually creating amazing harmonics with the bass line." "I am?" Zena was startled to realize her antennae were indeed moving in rhythm with the music. The sensation was not unpleasant. "Come on," Patel encouraged, "we're about to teach everyone the electric slide. It's perfect for beginners." Before she could protest, Zena found herself being led into the recreation module. The assembled crew, human and non-human alike, cheered at her arrival. Engineer Russell, still in his leather jacket, quickly began explaining the simple geometric patterns of the dance. To her surprise, Zena found her crystalline form adapting naturally to the movements. The mathematical precision of the steps appealed to her logical nature, while the shared experience of learning something new alongside her crew created an unexpected sense of unity. Even Lieutenant Quirks joined in, his tail proving particularly adept at the signature slide step. The Quantum Collective created fascinating light patterns that complemented the movements, while the Arcturians used their tentacles to add flourishes to each turn. As she executed another perfectly geometrical slide step, Zena made a mental note to update the station's cultural activity protocols. Perhaps these human practices, chaotic as they might initially appear, served a deeper purpose in fostering interspecies understanding. After all, it was difficult to maintain formal barriers when attempting to master something called the Macarena together. "Captain," Quirks managed to speak while maintaining his rhythm, his scales now pulsing in perfect synchronization with the beat. "Should we be concerned that the Quantum Collective has requested to host next week's dance party? They're talking about something called disco." Zena watched as an Arcturian and a human attempted to teach a Volasian how to spin without getting dizzy. "Schedule it," she decided. "But perhaps we should reinforce the gravity modulators first." "And Quirks?" "Yes, Captain. See if you can find out more about this disco phenomenon. Something tells me we're going to need more floating gas-filled spheres." Captain Zena Xylith had learned to expect the unexpected when it came to human cultural activities. After the success of both the birthday celebrations and the now weekly dance parties, she thought she had finally gotten a handle on human recreational customs. That was until she entered Cargo Bay 6 during what was supposed to be routine maintenance and found it transformed into what Engineer Russell enthusiastically called a zero-G sports arena. "It's called orbital volleyball," Technical Officer Patel explained, floating upside down relative to Zena's position. "We modified the traditional Earth game for zero-gravity conditions. The antimatter containment field generators make perfect court boundaries." Zena watched as members of her crew, both human and alien, propelled themselves through the weightless environment, attempting to keep a spherical object from touching the ground, though in zero-G, that concept seemed rather arbitrary. "Lieutenant Quirks," Zena called to her security chief, who was hovering near what appeared to be a scoring terminal. "I assume you've conducted a full safety analysis of this activity?" Quirks's scales shifted to what Zena had come to recognize as his enthusiastic professional color pattern. "Absolutely, Captain. We've implemented emergency gravity restoration protocols, installed additional cushioning fields, and..." He paused as an Arcturian executed a particularly impressive spinning serve. "I've personally tested all safety measures." "Indeed?" Zena's antennae twitched with amusement. "Is that why you were seen performing what Engineer Wong called a spectacular save during yesterday's match? If Valaxians could blush, Quirks would have." "Purely for security verification purposes, Captain." The game paused as Engineer Russell called for a team rotation. Zena observed with interest as the mixed-species teams rearranged themselves. A pair of Quantum Collective entities had joined the game, their energy forms creating fascinating patterns as they manipulated the ball. "Captain." Russell called out, his voice bouncing off the cargo bay walls. "We're one player short for the next rotation. Care to join Team Starburst? I don't believe my crystalline structure is suited for such." Xena began, but was interrupted by Officer Patel. "Actually, Captain, your crystalline form would be perfect for this. The way you naturally refract light could help track the ball's trajectory, and after seeing you at the dance party, we know you've got the moves." Before Xena could formulate a proper response, she found herself being guided toward the playing area. The Quantum Collective pulsed in what she'd learned was their version of encouragement, while the Arcturians waggled their tentacles in support. "The basic principle," Russell explained as he demonstrated, "is to keep the ball in play while moving through 0G. You can use any part of your body, or in your case, your crystalline structure, to hit the ball. The antimatter boundaries will change color if the ball crosses them illegally." To Xena's surprise, her natural ability to calculate geometric angles proved surprisingly useful in the game. Her crystalline form, which she had always considered purely functional, turned out to be remarkably well suited for redirecting the ball with precision. As the game progressed, Xena found herself caught up in the competitive spirit. The Quantum Collective on her team developed a strategy of creating minor energy distortions to confuse the opposite team's trajectory calculations, while the Arcturians used their tentacles for what Russell dubbed epic spikes. "Captain," Quirks called during a break between sets, his scales now showing his excited but trying to remain professional pattern, "the crew has suggested organizing an interstation sports league. They're calling it the 0G Games." "A league?" Xena's antennae crossed questioningly. "Yes," Patel chimed in, executing a perfect 0G somersault. "We're thinking volleyball, 0G tag, spatial dodgeball. The Quantum Collective has even proposed something they call energy field manipulation races." "And this would serve what purpose?" Xena asked, though she already suspected the answer. "Team building, cultural exchange, physical fitness." Russell listed off, "And honestly, Captain, it's just fun. When was the last time you saw the Arcturians and Valaxians voluntarily spending their off-duty hours together before we started these games?" Xena had to admit he had a point. The usual species-based social groupings had been gradually breaking down since the humans had introduced their various cultural activities. Even the Quantum Collective, traditionally so isolated, were now regular participants in station social events. Very well, she decided, using her crystalline structure to redirect a stray ball back to the playing area. "Lieutenant Quirks, please work with Officer Patel to establish safety protocols for this league. And..." She paused, her antennae quirking with what might have been mischief, "sign me up for the volleyball team. It seems my crystalline structure gives us an unfair advantage." The cargo bay erupted in cheers, with even the Quantum Collective producing a display of celebratory light patterns. As Xena moved back into position for the next set, she reflected on how these human cultural things, chaotic as they might seem at first, had a way of bringing out unexpected aspects of everyone's nature. "Captain," Quirks called out as the game resumed, his scales now showing an entirely new color pattern she'd never seen before, "the Volosien team is requesting a rematch from last week. They claim their tails give them superior ball control in 0G. "Tell them," Xena replied, positioning herself for a serve, "that crystalline precision beats tail control any day. And Quirks? Make sure we have enough of those floating gas-filled spheres for the league's opening ceremony. It seems they've become something of a station tradition." Captain Xena Xylith stood in what used to be Hydroponics Bay 3, her crystalline structure reflecting the unusual spectrum of colors now filling the space. Where once stood neat rows of nutritionally optimized vegetation, there now bloomed what engineer Russell called a garden of earthly delights. "Officer Patel," Xena addressed the excited human who was currently tending to something called a rose bush, "explain to me again why we've allocated 20% of our hydroponics capacity to plants with no nutritional value?" "Beauty, Captain." Patel beamed, carefully pruning the thorny plant. Humans need beauty just as much as we need food. These roses, these cherry blossoms, even these simple daisies, they feed our souls. Lieutenant Quirks, who had been examining a patch of bright yellow flowers with suspicious intensity, chimed in. Captain, I've analyzed these sunflowers, and while they do produce edible seeds, their primary purpose appears to be decorative. His scales shifted to their puzzled pattern. The humans spend considerable time simply looking at them. And this is necessary for human crew efficiency? Xena's antennae twitched as she watched an Arcturian delicately water a cascade of purple flowers with its tentacles. More than necessary, Engineer Russell appeared, wearing what he called a straw hat, another purely decorative human invention. Studies show that exposure to natural beauty improves mental health, reduces stress, and increases productivity. Even your crystalline structure seems to appreciate the aesthetics. You're refracting the sunlamp light in fascinating patterns through those orchids. Xena hadn't realized she drifted closer to the delicate white flowers. Their structure did possess a certain mathematical elegance that appealed to her crystalline nature. The Quantum Collective has been particularly interested in the garden, Patel added, gesturing toward a corner where several energy beings hovered among bioluminescent plants from Earth's deep oceans. They say the organic patterns help them understand physical beings better. Indeed, the Quantum Collective had been spending increasing amounts of time in the garden, their energy forms creating subtle light shows that seemed to respond to the plant's natural rhythms. One of them had even requested permission to tend a patch of what humans called morning glories. And what do you make of this, Lieutenant? Xena turned to Quirks, who was still studying the sunflowers. From a security perspective, he began, his scales shifting through professional shades, the garden has become an unexpected neutral ground for interspecies interaction. The Arcturians and Valaxians have started a joint project growing something called hybrid tea roses. He paused, then added with a slight color shift to embarrassment, and my scales have developed new patterns since I began assisting with the butterfly bush cultivation. As if on cue, one of the earth insects that had been introduced to help with pollination, after extensive quarantine and safety protocols, fluttered past Xena's antennae. The humans had insisted that a proper garden needed pollinators, and the small creatures had proven surprisingly adaptable to station life. Captain! Russell called out excitedly. You have to see this, the zero-gravity orchid experiment is showing remarkable results. We think the lack of directional gravity is creating entirely new growth patterns. Following Russell to a specially designed containment field, Xena observed how the plants had indeed developed unusual spiral patterns, reaching out in all directions rather than following standard gravitational cues. The sight was oddly mesmerizing. We're calling it the crystalline star pattern, Patel explained proudly. It reminded us of your species structure, beautiful, mathematical, yet organic in its own way. Xena felt her crystalline form vibrate with an unexpected warmth at the comparison. And these patterns, they serve no practical purpose? None whatsoever, Russell grinned. They're just beautiful. Sometimes that's enough. A small group of crew members had gathered around a newly blooming section of Japanese cherry blossoms. Humans, Arcturians, Valaxians, and even a few Quantum Collective entities all stood, or floated, together, simply appreciating. The scene struck Xena as significant in ways she couldn't quite crystallize. Lieutenant, she finally spoke, please update the station's resource allocation protocols. It seems beauty needs to be added as an essential supply category. Already done, Captain, Quirks replied, his scales showing a new pattern she'd never seen before, one that seemed to mirror the sunflowers he'd been studying. And the Volasian Botanical Society has requested permission to start a collection of earth succulents. They find the geometric patterns appealing. Approved, Xena nodded, her antennae swaying gently in the artificial breeze the humans had insisted was crucial for proper plant growth. But please ensure they understand that cacti needles and Volasian scales require careful coordination. As she turned to leave, Xena paused by the crystalline star orchids. Perhaps, she reflected, there was something to this human notion of beauty for beauty's sake. After all, her own species' crystalline structure had evolved far beyond mere functionality eons ago. "Oh, and Captain?" Patel called after her. "We're planning a garden party for next week's dance night. The Quantum Collective has figured out how to make their energy patterns match the bioluminescent flowers." "Of course they have," Xena replied, her crystalline structure catching and refracting the light in what might have been amusement. "Just make sure we have enough of those floating gas-filled spheres. They do seem to complement any human cultural activity." Captain Xena Xylith stood in the transformed main atrium of Station Delta 9, her crystalline structure shimmering with reflected light from 1,000 different sources. The space had been completely reorganized for what the humans called the first annual Interstellar Cultural Festival, though Xena suspected there was nothing annual about the chaos currently unfolding before her. "Status report, Lieutenant," she asked as Crix approached, his scales displaying what she now recognized as his barely contained excitement pattern. "The festival is exceeding all expectations, Captain," Crix replied, dodging a floating trail of those now ubiquitous gas-filled spheres. "The Quantum Collective's light dance performance is scheduled to begin in 10 minutes, followed by the Arcturian Human Joint Choir." "Joint choir?" Xena's antennae crossed in surprise. How did they manage to synchronize human vocal cords with Arcturian harmonic resonance? Engineer Russell claims it was inspired by something called jazz improvisation, Crix explained. "Though I suspect the weekly dance parties helped them figure it out." The atrium had been divided into various cultural zones, each showcasing different species traditions. The garden section, now expanded beyond its original boundaries, served as a natural centerpiece where all areas flowed together. Zero-gravity sports demonstrations took place in designated areas, while traditional Earth games like chess found new complexity when played with Quantum Collective strategic algorithms. "Captain." Officer Patel floated down from where she'd been adjusting some lighting arrays. "You have to see the fusion cuisine section. The Volosien chef and engineer Wong have created something they're calling zero-G sushi. It involves magnetic plates and levitating wasabi." Before Xena could respond, a soft chime indicated the beginning of the Quantum Collective's performance. The energy beings had spent weeks preparing what they described as a physical-metaphysical interpretation of cultural harmony. As their light patterns began to dance through the atrium, they interacted with both the bioluminescent plants and the crystalline structures that had been carefully positioned throughout the space. "Remarkable," Xena murmured as her own crystalline form naturally resonated with the display. "They've incorporated elements from every species' light perception range. And synchronized it with human musical patterns," Russell added, appearing beside them in what he called his festival best attire, a riot of colors that somehow worked in zero-G. The Quantum Collective has become quite fond of Earth's classical compositions. They say Bach's mathematical progressions help them understand physical existence better. The performance transitioned seamlessly into the joint choir presentation. Arcturian tentacles swayed in rhythm with human voices, creating harmonies that shouldn't have worked but somehow produced something entirely new and captivating. Even the station's environmental systems seemed to hum along. "Captain," Crix spoke up, his scales now showing a completely new pattern, one that seemed to incorporate aspects of every species' cultural colors. "I've been analyzing the station's efficiency metrics since we began incorporating these human cultural activities." "Oh?" Xena's antennae perked with interest. "Productivity is up 27%, interspecies cooperation has increased by 42%, and we haven't had a single diplomatic incident in 3 cycles." He paused, watching as a group of Valaxians demonstrated their traditional scale dancing to an enthusiastic human audience. "Though we have gone through an unprecedented number of those floating gas-filled spheres. A worthwhile trade-off, wouldn't you say?" Xena gestured toward where several Quantum Collective entities were teaching a group of mixed-species children how to create simple light patterns with their energy fields. "Indeed," Crix agreed, his scales rippling with pleasure. "Though I must admit, I never expected to see Volosyan traditional meditation being practiced in the garden, or Arcturian movement art being incorporated into zero-G sports. The festival continued around them, a beautiful chaos of cultural exchange. In one corner, humans were learning the intricate patterns of Volosyan scale language. In another, Arcturians explored earth art techniques, their tentacles creating fascinating interpretations of impressionist paintings. The Quantum Collective had set up what they called an energy-emotion translation station, attempting to help physical beings understand their form of existence. You know, Russell mused, watching as a young human taught a Volosyan child how to make paper cranes in zero-G, when we first proposed all these cultural activities, we never imagined it would lead to this. To what, exactly? Zena asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. To understanding, Patel replied, her eyes shining as she watched the continuing light performance. Real understanding. Not just tolerance or cooperation, but genuine appreciation for our differences. As if to emphasize her point, the Quantum Collective's light display formed a complex pattern that somehow managed to represent every species' traditional symbols simultaneously. The effect was stunning, particularly as it played through the garden's crystalline star orchids. "Captain," Crick said suddenly, his scales showing yet another new pattern, "the crew has submitted a formal request. They want to make the festival a genuine annual event. They're calling it the Unity Celebration." Zena watched as her station, her home, buzzed with the combined energy of multiple species sharing, learning, and growing together. The humans' seemingly chaotic cultural practices had somehow created something far more valuable than she could have imagined. "Approved," she said finally, her crystalline structure catching and reflecting the light in what was definitely amusement. "But let's make sure we have a permanent supply line for those floating gas-filled spheres. They do seem to have become an essential part of every cultural celebration." "Already arranged," Russell grinned. "And wait until you see what we're planning for next year's zero-G ballet performance." Zena's antennae twitched in what might have been alarm, but she found she was looking forward to whatever new chaos the humans would introduce next. After all, she reflected as she watched her crew celebrate together, sometimes the most beautiful crystals grew from the most unexpected solutions.